stumbling block, in my opinion, because we don't like change and we're resisting that change, and therefore it's going to leave us less prepared for what's coming. It's unfortunate that things have to get really bad before it's our human nature to turn around. So I took advantage of my time there, and I'll leave it at that.
I have a book and a website.
Okay, we could have you do that later. Okay. We'll let you do that. Okay, the first one, acting responsible. Help me if I do this incorrect. Values, I could read your writing much better than mine. Values, conflict, and common ground. And Carolyn basically listened to what you said, as I did, and then we took it together. Values, and these are things that came from the conversations. You know, evaluate expectations. Speak out and let policymakers hear us. Live within our means. Plan ahead. Privatize services such as transportation. Be prepared to survive. How we react locally will affect our lives, working together to sustain ourselves. That's what we came in our values, correctly? Conflict, and this is what Carolyn heard, conflict. Keeping money in parump. Have to lower expectations. Loss of retirement funds, inflation, or conserve. Are we just guessing? Incentives are sometimes skewed. Policymakers don't have a realization of everyday reality. Don't depend on the stock market, etc. Unions are detrimental to the economy. Invest in survival items, food, etc. The U.S. stock market or commodities. How do we face those day-to-day decisions? We don't have as many choices as before. Global economy has impacted us for decades. Common ground, look at day-to-day survival. That was the first one. Now let's go what we just talked about. Looking out for each other, values. Accountability for each other. These are the values that we found. Strong community is grassroots. I almost could say that back. Good grassroots develops strong community. Sharing basic knowledge and skills, I'll say. Community activism is important. You know, strong emphasis on that. I put little hash marks. That came up a couple of times. Establish and exchange a better barter system. The citizens do have the power to express desire. All righty. As I get down the list, it was the later thing, and then I start at the top. And the citizens aid and have the citizens participate in aid and formalizing a plan. You know, the best way to get someone to accept it is to put them on the selection committee. And when it's their idea, it's going to work. But when it's your idea, maybe not. Okay, conflict. There was quite a bit. Being dependent on outside forces. Not cooperating, knowing each other. Lack of preparation. Take things for granted. Local leadership uninformed. Lack of independence, meaning dependent on other things. Lack of a plan to help each other. Union organizations prevent clear cooperation. How to barter with. Should not rely on government. Lack of voter/public holding public officials accountable. All right? We become apathetic. You know, and we don't hold them accountable, and they don't do what we do, but then we complain that they're not doing what we want to do, but we didn't tell them what to do. That's right? No, you know, important to know your neighbor because of potential terrorism. That was the last thing that was said. You know, and that was one of the formations of the Postal Service. He knew what was coming in and out of every house and what was going on and all that, and it wasn't a conspiracy theory. Common ground, grassroots. Collective cooperation, self-sufficiency, become more neighborly, and citizens and public officials working together. Thank you.
Okay. We're going to take just a 10-15 minute break here. Bill, then we're going to come back, and Bill's going to finalize the dialogue with our last option, growing our way out. So grab some coffee, some water, cookies. Restrooms are down the hall. Come on back here. Doors are locked, so no one can leave. No, I'm just kidding.
Now, here's the problem, and Caroline, you did a very wise thing here, because where we're going on this, our final session here, we call an option, but it's kind of spinning off of what we've been talking about, is something I really could get windy about, and just, I have opinions on every bit of this. And basically what it is saying is, how do we get out of this mess? I'm only going to say one thing about it, is that it took not 5 or 10 years to get into it. It took more like 60. Like Dave was saying, since we were on a wrong track for a long, long time, so there's no pointing fingers. We were looking at some statistics just earlier about our unemployment rate, and talking with people across America, and as we were just saying, John, there's pockets in America where there's no recession. But if you look at Pahrump and Nevada and those key indicators, we are in a depression, not a recession. No one wants to say that word, but we are on the bottom. Now, the sad thing, listening to experts, and we were just talking about this too, construction is not going to come back as we have known it, nor is manufacturing. We're in a global economy, and the whole world is having a lot of difficulty. Our national monies are being invested in international countries, and et cetera, et cetera. The best indicator, however, is that it's going to take 2 to 4 years to bump down on the bottom. This is a projection. I hope it's wrong. I hope it's 3 months or maybe 6 months, and we can start seeing an upswing. But the projection is we're not on the bottom yet, and we're going to bounce around for about 4 years and then start a total climb back up. So our last session here, folks, really has to do that. And I want you to think about yourself and your capacity with your family in our community here in Pahrump, and how do we grow our way out of this? What can we do individually, collectively in our groups to basically not only get us through this low time, but start to be a part of the progression? One thing we did talk about was very clear: we cannot count on our government. We can have an impact on government or influence. But so the question, and I'll leave the floor, is how do we grow our way out of this mess?
Well, I'm not from Pahrump, but I talked to someone from Pahrump last month when I was up here. And she was talking about the city planning and the building department. And and this is the example she gave. There was a company that was looking to open up a manufacturing plant here in Pahrump. This was, I don't know if it was last year or earlier this year. And they started looking for a building. They found a building, but the building department and the city planners wanted them to put in a street and some sewer line connections that weren't directly to their building, but essentially improve the block that this building was going to be on. And they started looking at all the costs that this was going to incur on them, and so they ended up going to Mesquite, because Mesquite was already in place. They didn't have to worry about that. They could pretty much just move in and do stuff. So yes, we would all like to have a beautiful city, but these are the decisions that you have to, these are the big decisions you have to make as to whether or not you want to make so many regulations that you dissuade business, or whether or not you want to keep those regulations in place in order to make sure that you are in a, have a much happier place to live. So it's that two-edged sword. And as an architect, I work with a lot of building departments, and I have designed a couple of houses here in Pahrump, and it was real easy back 7, 8 years ago when there was no building department now. But I still had to, I'm a licensed architect, and I still had to make sure the building was sound, and I always hired an engineer, but we didn't have to worry about a building department. Now you do. So that's something that you as a city need to decide whether, how regulated you want to be.
So deregulation of so that we can react more quickly to new companies coming in that Al knows a lot about.
Okay, this is this is an opinion that that I've had for some time, and it's not without not without some thought, and it's not new. But if we don't get a national energy policy that makes sense, that gets us off of fossil fuels and starts using sun and air, or sun and wind, that we have plenty of here, and also water where it's plentiful, the life that we know in the United States is going to change drastically. Most experts you talk to will tell you that there is not enough ground on planet Earth to grow enough sugar or enough wheat or enough corn to make enough ethanol to drive the cars that we're driving today, let alone in the next 10 years. And it's going to require, if we continue to use the fossil fuels that we have without thinking about making any changes, we're not going to be able to fly our airplanes.
Can we do this at a local level? You mentioned a national.
And there's no reason why it can't be done at a local level. There's no reason why, piggybacking on your plans for building directions and regulations in Pahrump or wherever, that you have to build a windmill on your property, on your building, on your roof, whatever, or you have to put up solar panels. They work. But they pay back. They pay back. 20 years, but your kids might not have to pay, and there might be in 20 years another technology that we have in place that costs less.
Let's go to Al and then back over here.
You know, we'll address Pahrump because it's what I know. You ever hear the sins of the fathers fall on the children? That's what we have here. Our community had failed to provide years ago, and we're going to continue. You ask why there's no manufacturing or production here? There's a reason for it, because the infrastructure is not here. And there's a lack of cooperation to collectively get together and pay for that infrastructure. Now, we need to pay for it. We either pay now or pay a lot more later. And now we are at later, and it's costing a lot more to go ahead and do that. I concur with Dave is that if you know, and this isn't really the question though, but growing our way out is that every home, and every home should be self-sustainable from here on out. Yep. Every home that's built should be self-sustainable. Is it more expensive? Yes, it is. But is energy going to go up more? Absolutely. And even our economic security is, because we're so dependent on foreign fuel, and our last 3 sessions is being dependent on other things. We need to be more self-dependent. You know what? We need to bite the bullet. Okay? I am a conservative, but you know what? If you want to raise my taxes now. Let's get it under control instead of have to raising them on my children.
You trust the government to spend your taxes wisely?
Well, you know what? They're not going to make their budget. I don't care. You could only cut so much, and you know what? They don't have the money. It's not there.
I like Al's point about, as part of that efficiency, survival of energy efficiency with what we have in housing and everything else to sustain us through these tough times. Eric?
And with regards to growing our way out, Nevada is the perfect state to lead the country in renewable energy, alternative energy, nuclear.